The orbital research station Horizon's Edge floated silently above the swirling green clouds of the planet Varia. The planet's surface shimmered with emerald forests, winding silver rivers, and flashes of lightning deep inside its clouds. It was beautiful, but it wasn't the scenery that kept Ethan Cole here. Ethan was a human xenolinguist, a specialist in alien languages and culture. He had been assigned to the Veyri project almost a year ago, learning to translate their complex speech, gestures, and traditions. The Veyri were a tall, elegant species with skin that reflected the colors of their environment. Their voices were melodic, and their expressions subtle. Ethan found them fascinating. But there was one Veyri who fascinated him the most, Lyris. Lyris was an engineer on the station, responsible for maintaining the docking bay systems. She had long, pale silver hair that shimmered under the artificial lights, and her skin shifted from soft green to warm ivory depending on her mood. Over the months, she and Ethan had formed a strong friendship. They worked together often. He helped her understand human safety protocols, and she taught him how to interpret Veyri tools and machinery. That afternoon, they were sitting in the station's hydroponics garden, surrounded by rows of glowing plants. The air smelled faintly sweet from the flowers, and a gentle hum of water pumps echoed around them. Ethan was eating a ration bar while Lyris worked on a small drone. "You, humans and your compressed food bricks," Lyris said, tilting her head curiously. "How do you eat those without losing the will to live?" Ethan laughed. "Practice and low expectations." She chuckled, a soft, bell-like sound, then leaned closer to inspect his ration bar. "It smells like glue." "It tastes like glue, too," Ethan said with a grin. They both laughed. The sound felt warm, friendly, the kind of comfort that only came after months of shared work and easy conversation. Then it happened. Without warning, Lyris reached out and lightly bit the back of Ethan's hand. Not hard enough to hurt, just a quick, playful nip. "Ouch!" Ethan exclaimed, pulling his hand back and rubbing it. "What was that for?" Lyris smiled, her eyes bright. "It means you're fun to be around. It's a friendly thing where I come from." Ethan blinked, unsure whether to laugh or be confused. Well, in human culture, we usually just say, "Thank you," or maybe give a high five. She tilted her head again, clearly amused. "Your ways are strange. A bite shows trust. It says, 'You are part of my circle.'" Ethan smiled faintly. "All right. Well, I guess I'm honored." They went back to chatting, but Ethan couldn't help glancing at his hand now and then. It wasn't painful, but it was odd. The bite felt symbolic somehow, like it carried more weight than Lyris was admitting. Unknown to Ethan, the moment had not gone unnoticed. On the far side of the hydroponics garden, two older Veyri technicians were tending to the plants. Their sharp eyes had caught the exchange. One leaned toward the other and whispered something in their musical language. Both glanced at Ethan, then at Lyris, and their expressions shifted into something unreadable. By the time Ethan left the garden later that day, the whispers had already begun to spread. The station's corridors were quiet as Ethan walked toward his quarters. The hum of life support systems filled the air, along with the occasional distant clang from the engineering deck. But as he passed a group of Veyri crew members, they suddenly stopped talking and looked at him. Their expressions were not unfriendly, but there was a strange sort of respect in their eyes, like they were seeing him in a different way. Ethan frowned. That was unusual. He tried to shake it off. Maybe they had just heard about his work with the new translation software, or maybe he had something on his shirt. He didn't think much of it until he reached the mess hall that evening. When he entered, a Veyri server immediately approached, offering him a tray without him asking. It was loaded with fresh fruit from the hydroponics section, a rare treat, usually reserved for high-ranking guests. Ethan blinked. Thank you?" The server simply bowed slightly and walked away. Lyris was already sitting at a table, sipping from a tall glass of bright blue liquid. She smiled when she saw him. "You seem noticed tonight." "Yeah," Ethan said, sitting across from her. "People keep looking at me like I've grown an extra head. And someone just handed me a tray of fruit like I'm some kind of VIP. Lyris avoided his gaze for a moment. "Maybe they just appreciate your work." "Right," Ethan said slowly, but something in her voice told him there was more to it. That night, back in his small quarters, Ethan sat on his bunk typing notes into his translator pad. He was trying to document some new Very idioms Lyris had taught him earlier. But before he could finish, the pad beeped. An incoming message. It was encrypted, and not from any official human channel. Frowning, he opened it. The words appeared, slowly in translated text. "Protector, danger approaches. Stand ready." Ethan stared at the message, his brow furrowing. Protector? Danger? He wasn't a soldier. He was just here to study language, not fight in some battle. But something deep inside him told him this was connected to that playful bite from Lyris. In another section of the station, Lyris sat alone in her workshop, turning a small device over in her hands. Her expression was thoughtful, almost worried. The bite had been meant as a light-hearted gesture, or so she had told him. But she knew the truth. The act had been witnessed by her people's elders, and to them it meant Ethan had accepted an ancient bond, a bond that would demand much more than friendship, a bond that could soon put Ethan Cole in the middle of a war. Ethan woke the next morning feeling uneasy. The strange encrypted message from the night before was still fresh in his mind. Protector. Danger approaches. Stand ready. He stared at his translator pad for a while, wondering if it was some kind of prank. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. He had been on Horizon's edge long enough to know the Very didn't joke about danger. If anything, they avoided speaking about threats unless it was absolutely necessary. And that word, protector, felt like it carried a meaning he hadn't yet understood. The corridors of the station were busier than usual. Ethan noticed subtle changes in how people behaved around him. Very technicians stepped aside when he passed. Others gave him short, respectful nods. A few placed their hands over their chests, a gesture he had only seen before when Very were greeting elders or high-ranking leaders. When he reached the main observation deck, the giant window displayed the planet Varia in all its swirling green beauty. Lyris was standing there, gazing down at her homeworld. She didn't seem surprised to see him. "Ethan," she said with a small smile, "you're up early." "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I think I need to ask you something about yesterday." Her smile faltered, but she didn't turn away. "It's about the bite, isn't it?" "Yeah," Ethan said slowly. "Look, I understand it was supposed to be friendly, but last night I got a message. It called me Protector, and now everyone's treating me like I'm important." He paused, searching her eyes. "What's going on, Lyris?" Lyris hesitated, then took a deep breath. "In my culture, a bite is not only a gesture of friendship. It is also a sign, a very old sign, that you have been accepted into a clan's protection bond." Ethan frowned. "Protection bond?" She nodded. "It means you have a duty. If the clan faces danger, you stand with them. You fight beside them. You share in their survival." Ethan blinked. "Wait, you mean I just accidentally signed up for your people's defense force?" "In a way," Lyris said softly. "It is more than that. Once the elders see this gesture, it becomes binding. And they did see it." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Lyris, I'm not a fighter. I study languages. The only thing I've ever battled is a broken coffee machine." Her expression was serious now. I know, but the bond is not something the elders will take lightly. If they believe you are the protector, they will expect you to fulfill that role, even if you never intended it. Before Ethan could respond, the station's alarm system chimed with a low, warning tone. A calm but urgent voice echoed through the speakers. Attention all crew. Long-range sensors have detected unidentified vessels approaching Viria's outer perimeter. All departments prepare for potential security protocols. Ethan's heart sank. That can't be a coincidence. Lyris's gaze shifted toward the observation window. In the distance, faint glimmers of light moved across the blackness of space. They were still far away, but their formation was tight and purposeful. That's them, she murmured. Whoever they are, they're not from any Alliance fleet. Ethan leaned closer to the glass. Could be traders or scientists. Her voice was firm. No, look at their trajectory. They're moving toward the planetary defense grid. This is not a peaceful approach. Hours later, Ethan sat in the command briefing room. To his surprise, the Viri elders had invited him to the meeting, something normally reserved for military officers and high-ranking leaders. The room was shaped like a half-circle, with a large holodisplay in the center showing the incoming fleet. The ships were unlike anything Ethan had seen before. Sharp, jagged designs with dark hulls that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Their engines pulsed with a cold blue glow, and they moved like predators closing in on prey. This is not a random incursion, one elder said. They are probing for weakness in our defenses. Another elder turned her gaze to Ethan. The protector has been chosen. He must be prepared. Ethan nearly choked on his own breath. Wait, are we talking about me? Because I think there's been a huge misunderstanding here. There is no misunderstanding, the elder replied calmly. The bond is sealed. You carry the mark of trust. Ethan looked at Lyris for help, but she only gave him a small, apologetic glance. After the meeting, Lyris walked beside him in the corridor. I'm sorry, Ethan. I never thought the elders would see it. He shook his head. This is insane. You know I'm not trained for this kind of thing. You will be, she said quietly. If the fleet reaches Viria, everyone will have to fight. I'll make sure you're ready. Ready for what? Ethan asked. Her answer came in a whisper. To survive. That evening, Ethan returned to his quarters to find a small package on his desk. Inside was a sleek, curved blade, unlike any human weapon he had ever seen. Its handle was made of a material that shifted colors in the light, and the blade itself emitted a faint hum, as if alive. A folded note rested beside it. In the Viri language, it read, To the Protector, this is your bond blade. May it defend your clan when the shadows arrive. Ethan picked up the blade, feeling its strange weight in his hands. It was beautiful and terrifying. He set it down, his mind racing. Somewhere out there, an unknown fleet was getting closer, and somehow, because of one playful bite, he was, now tied to the defense of an entire alien clan. Far across the station, Lyris stood at a viewing port, watching the distant glimmers of the enemy ships. Her people were preparing for the worst. And though she had tried to hide it, she felt a deep unease. Ethan had been brought into her world by accident. But now, the fate of her clan, and maybe even the fragile trust between humans and Viri, rested partly on his shoulders, and the enemy was getting closer every hour. The Horizon's Edge station felt different now. There was a quiet tension in the air, like the pause before a storm. Crew members moved with urgency, and conversations were hushed. The glimmers of the approaching fleet had grown brighter and sharper, no longer distant specks but clearly defined shapes. Ethan walked through the station's central corridor, his mind heavy. Just 2 days ago, his biggest challenge was understanding a tricky Viri verb structure. Now people were calling him Protector and handing him weapons he didn't know how to use. He carried the bond blade in its sheath, clipped to his belt. The weight of it felt unnatural. Every time it brushed against his leg, he was reminded that he wasn't just an observer anymore. He was a participant in something dangerous. In the main hangar, Lyris was working on a defense drone, her hands moving with quick precision. Sparks flew as she sealed a panel shut. She looked up when Ethan approached. "You came," she said, her tone somewhere between relief and determination. "I'm not sure I had a choice," Ethan replied. "Apparently, I've got a new job now." Her expression softened, but only for a moment. "Then we'd better make sure you don't fail at it." She pointed toward a cleared section of the hangar floor. "We're starting your training today." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Training? As in actual combat? As in learning how to survive," Lyris said firmly. "You won't be alone out there, but you'll need to defend yourself, and me, if it comes to it." The first lesson was with the bond blade. Lyris showed him the proper stance, feet apart, knees slightly bent, blade angled forward. She moved with graceful precision, each motion smooth and efficient. Ethan tried to mimic her movements, but his form was clumsy. The blade felt awkward in his grip. "Your arms are too stiff," Lyris said, stepping closer to adjust his posture. "You're holding it like it's something fragile. It's not. It's an extension of you. Trust it." He exhaled slowly and tried again. This time, the blade sliced through the air with a faint hum, feeling slightly less foreign in his hands. "Better," Lyris said. "Now we practice blocking." They spent the next hour exchanging slow, controlled strikes and parries. Even at reduced speed, Ethan found himself sweating and breathing hard. After the bond blade came the defense drones. Small, spherical machines floated in the air, projecting harmless energy bolts. Ethan's task was to dodge or deflect them using the blade. At first, the bolts hit him more than he could count. A light sting would buzz against his arm or shoulder, making him flinch. But with each round, his reactions grew faster. He started to anticipate where the drones would fire, moving before the bolt left the emitter. "Good," Lyris said after the third round. "You're learning." Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. "I still feel like a terrible choice for this role." "Maybe you are," Lyris admitted. "But the bond doesn't choose based on skill. It chooses based on trust. My people believe in you. I believe in you. The rest we can work on." Between training sessions, Ethan sat with Lyris in the mess hall. The food tasted bland, but neither of them cared much. They were too focused on the approaching danger. He glanced out the viewport toward the stars. "Those ships, do you know who they are?" Lyris shook her head. "No one does. The design is unfamiliar and they're not answering hails. That makes them either reckless or hostile." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "And if they're hostile, then they'll test our defenses," she said, "and we'll have to respond." That evening, Ethan visited the observation deck alone. The fleet was closer now, and the station's sensor grid tracked them with bright markers on the holo display. He could see at least a dozen large vessels, each accompanied by smaller escorts. The view was strangely beautiful, silent shapes gliding through the void, their cold blue engines leaving faint trails of light. But there was no mistaking their intent. They were coming straight for Varia. As he stood there, one of the elders approached. The elder was tall, with skin the color of moonlight and eyes like polished stone. "You are watching them," the elder said. "Yes," Ethan replied, trying to understand what they want. "They want what they always want," the elder said softly. "Resources, power, control. The Vairi have survived many who came seeking such things, but this time..." He studied Ethan for a long moment. "This time will be different. We have you." Ethan almost laughed. "I'm just one human with barely any training." The elder's gaze was steady. "One human who carries the bond. That is enough." The next day, Lyris brought Ethan to the simulation chamber. The room transformed into a digital battlefield, a projection of the station's corridors under attack. Hollow enemies emerged from doorways, their weapons flashing. Ethan's pulse raced as he ducked behind cover, returning fire with a practice blaster. Lyris moved beside him, calm and focused, calling out instructions in both Vari and English. They ran the scenario again and again until Ethan could move without overthinking every step. He wasn't fast, and he wasn't flawless, but he was, starting to react like someone who could survive. When the simulation ended, Lyris gave a small nod. "Not bad. You might just live through this." "I'll take that as a compliment," Ethan said, breathing hard. Later, back in his quarters, Ethan sat on his bunk and stared at the bond blade. He thought about the first day he'd met Lyris, how she had been fixing a broken docking clamp while humming a tune he didn't understand. He had come to this station for knowledge, for language, not for battle. But now language alone wouldn't save them. He clipped the blade to his belt, again feeling its weight. The enemy fleet was still days away, but each hour brought them closer. And when they arrived, there would be no hiding. Somewhere in the quiet of the station, a low hum from the engines filled the air. It reminded him of a heartbeat, steady, unyielding. Ethan wasn't sure if he could become the protector the Vari believed him to be, but he knew one thing. When the storm arrived, he wouldn't run. The following days on Horizon's edge were a blur of drills, instructions, and aching muscles. The enemy fleet was still a few days away, but the station no longer felt like a place of research. It had become a fortress in waiting. Ethan Cole, who once spent his time decoding alien phrases and cataloging idioms, now spent his hours sweating in the training hall. Every morning, Lyris was there to meet him, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. She didn't waste time with small talk. Bond blade. "First," she said on the third day, tossing him the weapon. Ethan caught it clumsily. "You know, there's a reason I chose linguistics instead of sword fighting." "And there's a reason the elders chose you," Lyris replied, stepping into position. "The bond doesn't care about your career choices." She drilled him on stances until his legs ached. The bond blade was strange to wield, light enough to swing quickly, yet heavy in a way that demanded control. Every movement had to be balanced. If he swung too wildly, she corrected him. If he blocked too slowly, she struck the side of his blade with a sharp clang that made his hands sting. "You're thinking too much," she told him after one failed block. "That's my specialty," he said through clenched teeth. "Not anymore. Now your specialty is surviving." In the afternoons, they trained with the defense drones again, but this time Lyris added complications. She programmed the drones to attack in unpredictable patterns, forcing Ethan to move in ways that felt unnatural. Sometimes they fired from behind, sometimes from above. He had to spin, duck, and block without hesitating. By the fourth round, sweat dripped into his eyes. His arms burned from holding the blade steady. "You're improving," Lyris said. Ethan wiped his forehead. "If that's true, I'd hate to see where I started." She smiled faintly. "Where you started? You would have been dead in the first minute." When they weren't in the training hall, Lyris took Ethan to other parts of the station to teach him Vari defense tactics. She showed him how to use the narrow corridors to his advantage, how to trigger the magnetic seal doors in emergencies, and how to read the shifting lights on the walls. A subtle warning system most humans ignored. One evening, they stood in a quiet maintenance tunnel overlooking the docking bay. Vari engineers worked below, installing extra shield emitters. The air smelled faintly of ozone from the welding tools. Ethan leaned on the railing. "You really think they'll attack here, on the station?" "If they want to take Varia," Lyris said, "this station is the key. It controls access to the planet's orbital lanes. Lose it, and the planet becomes vulnerable." He was silent for a moment. "And if we lose?" She looked at him then, her silver hair catching the soft blue light. "Then my people will remember that we fought." That night, Ethan sat alone in his quarters, staring at the bond blade lying across his knees. The training had changed him more than he realized. His body felt stronger, his movements more controlled. He wasn't a warrior, not yet, but he was no longer just a scholar either. He remembered something one of the elders had told him on the observation deck. The bond is not given for skill. It is given for trust. Lyris trusted him. The elders trusted him. Whether or not he believed in himself didn't matter. Not anymore. The next morning, Lyris introduced something new. Simulated boarding scenarios. She and Ethan, along with a small team of mixed human and Vary crew, ran through drills where enemy forces stormed the station. In these exercises, the corridors became a maze of flashing lights and echoing alarms. Ethan learned to move with the team, to cover his allies, while advancing, to listen for Lyris's short-clipped commands. She had a way of keeping her voice steady even in the middle of simulated chaos. During one drill, a hollow enemy rushed him unexpectedly. His reflexes took over. Blade up, twist to the side, and a quick slash across the projected attacker. The image flickered and vanished. Lyris glanced at him, an approving glint in her eyes. "See? You can fight!" Ethan's breathing was heavy. "I can react. That's not the same thing." "It is in battle," she said simply. After training, they went to the hydroponics garden, the same place where the bite had happened days ago. The plants glowed softly in the artificial light, their leaves swaying gently from the ventilation system's breeze. Ethan sat on a bench, exhausted. "You know, I never asked, why did you do it? The bite?" Lyris looked thoughtful. "Because you made me laugh. You listened when I spoke. You treated me like an equal, not like a subject in a study. In my culture, that is rare from an outsider. I wanted to show my trust." He smiled faintly. "Well, it worked. Even if it might get me killed." Her voice softened. "I will not let that happen." The following day, the tension on the station thickened. The incoming fleet had altered formation, a sign they were preparing for something. In the command center, the sensor readings showed them accelerating toward Varia's defense perimeter. Ethan stood beside Lyris, watching the display. "They're coming sooner than expected," he murmured. "Yes," she said. "We will have to be ready." He looked at her, then at the bond blade at his side. "Then let's make sure we are." That evening, as the station lights dimmed to simulate night, Ethan found himself back in the training hall alone. He activated a single defense drone and began practicing the drills Lyris had taught him. His movements were slower than hers, less graceful, but they were steady. Each strike, each block, felt like one more step toward becoming what the Vary needed him to be. The Protector might not have been the role he chose, but it was the role he had now, and he was determined not to fail it. The alarm began as a low, steady hum, but within seconds it grew louder and sharper. The voice of the station's automated system followed. "Alert! Unidentified fleet entering defense perimeter. All crew to battle stations." Ethan jolted awake, heart pounding. He barely had time to grab his bond blade and secure it to his belt before the corridor lights switched to a deep red, flashing in a slow, ominous rhythm. Outside his quarters, crew members moved quickly toward their assigned posts. He spotted Lyris near the lift, fastening her utility belt. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held the same focus he'd seen during training. "They're here," Ethan said. "They're here," she confirmed. "Follow me." The command center was alive with activity. Hollow displays showed the enemy, fleet in sharp detail now, black, angular warships cutting through space in a tight attack formation. Smaller escort craft swarmed around them like hunting birds. Varian officers exchanged rapid instructions in their melodic language. Human advisors added tactical suggestions, their voices clipped and precise. Ethan could feel the tension in the air, a mixture of fear and determination. On the main display, the enemy fleet crossed into the engagement zone. The station's defense cannons lit up, sending bursts of bright energy into the void. The first few shots struck true, forcing one of the smaller enemy ships to veer off course. But the larger vessels kept coming. "Ethan, with me," Lyris called. She led him to the tactical operations room, a smaller chamber connected to the command center. Here, a team monitored ground-level defenses on the planet below and coordinated the station's internal security. "They'll try to bypass the station's main weapons," she explained. "That means boarding parties. Our job is to stop them before they reach critical systems." Ethan nodded, gripping the hilt of his bond blade. His stomach churned, but he forced himself to focus. The first wave hit minutes later. Alarms blared again, and the floor shuddered under their feet as enemy boarding pods slammed into the station's outer hull. "Deck C, docking bay breach," someone shouted. Lyris turned to Ethan. "That's our sector. Let's move." The corridors near Deck C were chaos. Very defenders in light armor moved into position, forming defensive lines. The air smelled faintly of scorched metal from the impact. A loud metallic clang echoed as the boarding pod's doors were forced open from the inside. Figures emerged, tall, armored beings with dark, segmented plating that made them look insect-like. Their weapons glowed faintly, pulsing with a cold blue light. The defenders opened fire, energy bolts filling the corridor with flashes of light. Ethan stayed low behind cover, his heart racing. Lyris fired from his side, her shots precise. One of the attackers broke through the defensive line, rushing toward their position. Without thinking, Ethan stepped out, bond blade in hand. The enemy swung its weapon, a jagged staff, but Ethan blocked the strike with a loud crack. Training kicked in. He twisted his body, forcing the attacker off balance, and delivered. A sharp slash across its weapon arm. Sparks flew as the enemy stumbled back, retreating into the chaos. Lyris glanced at him. "Not bad, Protector." "Let's not make a habit of this," Ethan replied, breathing hard. The battle raged across multiple decks. Reports came in of other breaches, but Deck C held. Once the enemy boarding party was repelled, Lyris led Ethan toward the maintenance. "Tunnels that connected to the defense grid controls. They might target the grid from inside," she said. "If they disable it, the planet will be exposed." Sure enough, as they neared the control hub, they found another enemy squad trying to force the sealed doors open. Ethan remembered the drills. He and Lyris moved as a team. She drew their attention with precise blaster fire while he moved in close, blade flashing in the dim light. The confined space worked in their favor, limiting the enemy's movement. Within minutes, the attackers were down or retreating, and the control hub remained intact. Over the station's comms, the voice of the chief tactical officer rang out. "Enemy fleet is pulling back from perimeter. Ground defenses holding. Continue securing all decks." Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "They're leaving?" "For now," Lyris said. "But they'll be back. This was only a test." He knew she was right. The enemy hadn't thrown their full strength into the attack. They were probing, looking for weaknesses. The real battle was still ahead. Hours later, the station was quieter. Emergency crews worked to repair damaged sections, while security teams swept for any remaining enemy presence. Ethan and Lyris stood in the observation deck, looking out at the planet below. The green swirls of Varia's atmosphere looked calm, peaceful, almost untouched by the chaos in orbit. But Ethan knew that peace was fragile. "You did well today," Lyris said. "I got lucky," Ethan replied. "Maybe. Or maybe you're starting to understand what it means to be Protector." He thought about that. The title still felt strange, but he couldn't deny that something inside him had shifted. In the heat of battle, he hadn't thought about himself, only about keeping Lyris and the others safe. The enemy would return, and when they did, he'd be ready. It was just before dawn cycle on Horizon's edge when the long-range sensors lit up again. This time, there was no slow approach, no testing of defenses. The enemy came in hard, their warships cutting across the void like blades. The largest ship, a jagged titan bristling with weapons, led the charge. The station shook as its shields absorbed the first wave of fire. Across every deck, the red emergency lights began to flash, accompanied by the repeating alarm. All crew to battle stations. Enemy assault in progress. Ethan was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bunk with his bond blade in hand. He had slept in his boots just in case. When the alarm sounded, he stood, clipped the blade to his belt, and stepped into the corridor. Lyris was there, as if she'd been waiting for him. They're focusing on the east docking ring. That's where the strike leader will be. Strike leader? Ethan asked, moving with her toward the lifts. Their commander, she said. Take him out, and the boarding force will lose. Coordination. The ride to the east docking ring was silent except for the low hum of the lift. Ethan could feel the weight of the moment pressing on his chest. This was different from the first attack. There would be no holding back from the enemy this time. When the doors opened, the scene ahead was chaos. Very defenders and human marines fired in overlapping arcs, trying to hold the line. Energy bolts hissed through the air, and the sharp smell of scorched metal filled the corridor. At the center of it all, a towering figure advanced slowly through the firestorm. The strike leader's armor was heavier and darker than the others, its surface etched with strange symbols. His weapon, a long, curved blade crackling with blue energy, cut down defenders who got too close. That's him, Lyris said. Ethan's grip tightened on his bond blade. Guess we don't get to warm up this time. They pushed forward, using cover where they could, until the strike leader's attention turned to them. His glowing eyes locked on Ethan, and for a moment the sounds of battle seemed to fade. The alien commander stepped forward, his soldiers holding back as if giving him space. Ethan drew his blade. The hum of the weapon in his hand felt steady, like it understood what was coming. The first clash was brutal. The leader's strikes were heavy and fast, forcing Ethan to block with all his strength. Each impact sent a jolt up his arms. Lyris moved at his side, firing at enemies who tried to interfere, giving Ethan the space he needed to focus. Ethan remembered his training. Not every blow had to be blocked directly. He sidestepped one slash, letting it glance off his blade, and countered with a quick strike to the leader's side. The armor absorbed most of it, but the movement slowed the enemy for a heartbeat. That was enough. Ethan pressed forward, driving the fight away from the defensive line so the others could regroup. The leader's blade sparked as it met his again and again, the sound ringing in Ethan's ears. For a moment, it seemed like the enemy's strength might overwhelm him. His arms ached, his breathing was sharp and ragged. But then he heard Lyris's voice from behind him, steady and clear. Trust the bond, Ethan. You're not fighting alone. The words gave him a surge of focus. The leader swung in a wide arc, and Ethan dropped low, rolling under the strike. He came up inside the enemy's guard and drove his bond blade upward in a powerful slash. The leader staggered back, his weapon, arm now sparking from the blow, but he didn't fall. With a roar, the alien commander lunged again, forcing Ethan back. They exchanged a flurry of strikes, the corridor echoing with the clash of blades. Finally, Ethan saw his opening, a small gap in the leader's armor at the side of his neck. He stepped in, feinted high, and then struck low, the bond blade finding its mark. The leader froze, then collapsed to one knee before toppling forward. The effect was immediate. Across the docking ring, the enemy soldiers faltered. Without their commander, their movements became disorganized. The defenders seized the moment, driving them back toward the breach points. Retreat! A Vyri officer shouted, and the remaining invaders withdrew to their boarding pods, which blasted away from the station under covering fire from their fleet. Moments later, the enemy ships broke formation and jumped out of range, leaving only the stars behind. The battle was over. Ethan leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His arms felt like they were made of lead, but the bond blade was still steady in his hand. Lyris approached, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled. "You did it," she said. "We did it," Ethan corrected. Later, in the council chamber, the elders formally recognized Ethan as protector of the clan. They spoke in the Vairi language, their voices melodic but solemn, and placed a silver band around his wrist, a symbol of the bond. "You defended our people when you could have walked away," the head elder said. "The bond chose well." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he simply bowed his head in respect. After the ceremony, he and Lyris returned to the hydroponics garden. The air was calm there, the soft hum of water pumps a welcome contrast to the chaos of the battle. "You know," Ethan said, sitting on the same bench as before, "when you bit my hand, I had no idea what it meant. I thought it was just some weird alien version of a joke." Lyris smiled faintly. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I think it was the start of the most important promise I've ever made." They sat in silence for a while, watching the glowing leaves sway in the artificial breeze. Outside the station's walls, the stars glittered quietly, for now. Ethan knew the enemy might return one day, but he also knew something else. He wasn't just a linguist anymore. He was the protector, and he would stand with the Vairi again if they needed him.